Hello, everyone. My name is Trisha Keith. I'm an end of embodiment doula and an astrologer. Today, I'm looking at the ASTRO death chart of writer Octavia Butler. Before we get into her death chart, we'll travel through her natal chart and outline the energies she was working with through her life and those reflected in her work as a novelist. Butler wrote many award-winning sci-fi futuristic novels. Today I will be focusing on the parable of the sower for the themes it highlights in her chart. Written in 1993, the story is set 33 years ahead, through the years 2024 to 2027. It reads like a warning to Americans of the destructive trends she saw developing, those being an ever-expanding social decay, devolving into a crisis of government corruption, married with corporate greed, creating urban warfare, leaving people with little to nothing to fall back on. No skills, no education, no healthcare, no systems in place to protect them from the onslaught of enforced cultural poison and violence. The parable of the sower is about the seeds we plant for the future while the empire is collapsing. It's an optimistic dystopia that has a very eerie relatability today. Octavia Butler was born June 22nd, 1947, in Pasadena, California at 6:30 a.m. Her sun at 0 Cancer is a newborn infant Cancer at 0 degrees. Her sun speaks of and to her homeland, America, in ruins, in danger, and in a kind of reshaping of the Christian God that runs through her 12th house and through America, where her soulful maturity was shaped. Much of Butler's writing within the sci-fi genre explored her personal experiences and imagination as a Black woman. Her sun, ruled by a dramatic and loyal Leo moon in the second house, buoyed her private 12th house sun, giving her inner shine along with her creative mind. Butler was an only child, raised by her widowed mother. Due to her shyness, dyslexia, and what she recalls as being physically awkward, she kept mostly to herself through her childhood, taking refuge in library books where she could inhabit the worlds of knowledge and imagination. Lauren Alamina, the 15-year-old protagonist of The Parable of the Sower, opens her first journal entry in 2024. Lauren chronicles her daily life, thoughts, and challenges. Like her author, she was writing herself into her own world. As clearly as Lauren saw and felt the ruins and suffering around her, she needed to craft a new medicine that would bring her and others safely into a future that she could lay her trust in. Lauren Alamina was likely a Cancer sun or a Cancer moon. Lauren begins writing, or in her own words, discovering the scriptures of the books of the living, Earthseed. She writes, God is change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Octavia Butler's Cancer sun made a wide conjunction to Uranus and Gemini, both in the 12th house. Giving her the grace to see beyond convention, Butler likely felt unconstrained by the normative world around her when she was writing and connecting with her higher mind. Lauren, her protagonist, lived in a walled city. The people outside her community walls were without names, without homes, desperate, aggressive, addicted, and deeply suffering thieves whose dignity had long been lost. These people had nothing left to lose in attacking another to get a next fix or a bit of food. Life outside the community walls was a living hell of dog eat or be eaten. Butler's safety in isolation was her lived experience through the 1950s as a young, gifted, and Black writer growing up. Butler's outsiderness needed protection. Cancer. The mutual reception of her sun and moon spanning the 12th and second houses cradled her first house, Mercury in Cancer, full of imaginative thinking, feeling, and rich images. Mercury in its house of joy is the placement of a good storyteller or poet who writes for the benefit of others in a strong and loving language. We hover now over Butler's Leo moon at the apex of a T-square in fixed signs and succeedent houses, 11th, 2nd, and 5th. This is a creative storm or creative tension pressed between passion, resistance, expansion, and determination to overcome life-threatening obstacles. Themes that run through the parable of the sower concur. Resources are scarce. Our need for growth is connected to our ability to endure our own agony. Our sweet success is a pause in the pain. Flights into rapture, unplanned, are gifts of nature of which we are connected. A complicated moon in the second house of values, talents, earnings, and family support, ruled by her sun in the 12th. Her moon would draw in the higher mind of earth seed scriptures and the characters that would role play her story. Lauren Olamina is a working representation of Butler in many regards. Olamina and Butler both come from Baptist families and both left the Baptist church to restructure their relationship with God. With a deep love for the earth and a reverence for nature's cycles, both author and character were highly observant of trends approaching, those that sustain life in natural cycles of life, death, life, and those that destroy indiscriminately. Lauren Olamina planned quietly, remotely, without others watching. She tested her best friend's loyalty and ability to keep Lauren's plans on the down low, but her friend failed her and told the adults. Lauren then took her planning to a deeper, covert level, where others would not question her escape from the inevitable danger she saw rising over their community walls, unleashing mayhem and fire. The 12th and second houses are not obvious areas of personality. They are reserved internal spaces. Lauren planned on being a survivor. Through the Taurus-Scorpio axis in Butler's chart, we see the signature of a survivor through crisis. The 5th and 11th houses were where the action happened. Mars in Taurus, while in its detriment, has the endurance to build one brick at a time. Mars conjunct North Node in Venus propelled the stamina and ensured the interest of her Venus in Gemini to stay on track and develop something and someone outstanding in the 11th house. Through the 11th and 5th houses, Butler was brought into social realms where she would have been seen for her willingness to go where few ever would, Scorpio, and for her skill in telling a great story of the common person to the common person, Gemini. Lastly, we come to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 1947 in Butler's first house, defining not only her personal experience, but the social chaos, breakdown, and loss of life of World War II. The prior Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Cancer in 1914 defined World War I. Our last Pluto-Saturn conjunction was in 2020, with Jupiter in the mix. The year of our global pandemic and Black Lives Matter worldwide movement. Trump was in power, just beginning to taunt the MAGA movement and shamelessly shape the global hegemony of white economic supremacy and insanity. With the Pluto-Saturn conjunction in her first house, Octavia Butler likely experienced the intensity of Pluto and the compression of Saturn directly in her body. In fact, her personal experience was probably pretty close to what Lauren Olamina experienced as a sharer, those whose so-called disability was their hyper empathy. The condition enabled Lauren with the experience of pain or pleasure of those around her. If Lauren saw someone being beaten, she felt and caught the bruises. If someone was shot, she felt the impact. If a couple were in a state of arousal, she felt that too. Though tragically, Lauren's world was filled with much more pain than pleasure. Her hyper-empathy was a central and paradoxical element of the story that acted as both a devastating disability for her and a crucial tool for creating a new empathetic and caring society. Saturn represents authority, limits, and structure. Pluto represents power, transformation, and the descent to and resurrection from the underworld. Combining Saturn and Pluto energies outlines the structures of control that wield power. Natives with Saturn-Pluto aspects live to some degree or another with an exodus story, one of deep loss and a thorough restructuring and regeneration that humans have walked over and over again. In the last third of the novel, Lauren meets and partners with an older, educated Black man. Both with African heritage, they agree to refer to each other not by their given names, as their deceased families would have called them, but by their ancestors' family names. Lauren's entire nuclear family were now dead. She would no longer hear her name called by the family members she respected the most, her father, Saturn. Now, she and her male partner, older by 30 years, Saturn, would refer to each other by their African ancestors' family names, Pluto, Alamina and Bankole. Their ancestors' restoration, walking and living within them. With Bankole, Alamina was initiated into her new status and a new life. With him by her side, she led and built her community through reciprocal trust and support as they walked through an ongoing catastrophe that could have ended their lives at any moment. Alamina had partnered with a man of intelligence and emotional maturity. who would respectfully question her earthseed philosophy, helping her young mind shape the contours of her vision. The closing of the novel ended rather abruptly, which made me reflect on the sudden ending of Butler's life. In the novel, the Earthseed community had been on the road of Exodus for weeks and days. They had suddenly arrived at Bancole's family property, where his sister, brother-in-law, and their 2 children were found as skulls and bones exposed within the ash and burnt remnants of what was their home. Bancole's words to Alamina as he began to digest the enormity of his loss were something like, "You don't know what this country once was. You don't know how much we have lost. Maybe it is because of your youth that you can see a new future with a sense of possibility and hope." He then went on to challenge and protest against Alamina's earthseed scriptures, saying, "The only lasting truth is change. God is change. That means nothing." Her Uranian scriptures lacked the moral and emotional validation that he craved. Uranus in the 12th will seek freedom from perceived walls with an inexplicable certainty of its way forward. Alamina replied, "They mean everything, everything," with a capital E. Bancole gives in to his sense of futility. He anticipates that the social chaos and downward spiral of loss and destruction would have farther to go. He predicted that it would only be a matter of time before the same fate his sister's family faced would come to meet them. He warned Alamina against her hopes for the future, just as she had warned others before she set off on her exodus. Bancole's grief was so deep and raw, it was all he could see. And yet, he made the commitment to stay with Alamina and her newly formed community, Acorn, to work together and build anew, even though he didn't have the faith in Acorn's delivery or sustainability. Grieving his losses and caring for his community was probably the most useful thing he could do. Of course it was, especially as an elder. Without his grief, he would lose his heart and his capacity to feel. The community needed the wisdom of his humanity, needed him to trust his feelings, and needed him to stay connected to them. Now we will look into Octavia Butler's death chart, and then the synastry between her natal and death charts. As I said earlier, Octavia Butler was born June 22nd, 1947 in Pasadena, California. She died on February 24th, 2006 in Forest Lake Park, Washington, at the age of 57. Most notable in her death chart are the aspects to the sun and the moon. Born with an opening Uranus-Sun conjunction, she died with a closing Sun-Uranus conjunction. Her death likely came to her as a shock, as much as it did to everyone else. Reports indicated that she died from head injuries sustained after falling and striking her head on a walkway, potentially caused by a stroke. It is fitting that we find in her death chart an opening square of Mars to Sun conjunct Uranus. Sudden stroke, injury to the head, Mars, Uranus. When we look back, when we turn back the clock and look to the beginning of the Mars-Sun synodic cycle prior to her death, we find a very powerful Sun-Moon-Mars conjunction at 22 Virgo. Adding to the intensity of the pre-death chart, Sun-Moon-Mars conjunction, we're in a closing square to Pluto, signaling a final test before their conjunction and descent. The triple conjunction at 22 Virgo trined her natal Mars at 23 Taurus, squared her natal Uranus at 22 Gemini, and quincunxed her natal Moon at 22 Leo. This triple conjunction planetary ping ball set up a series of reoccurrence transits over the next 18 months, led through the lunar cycles. With Moon being the ruler of her ascendant and sun, the gong was ringing loud inside her. Saturn, in the pre-death chart, sat exactly conjunct her Mercury at 24 Cancer in her natal first house. Saturn limits the time and space we experience within our bodies. Saturn on her Mercury in her first house feels especially ominous. She likely received news at the time that was harsh and defining, laying an impact on her physical and psychological bodies. It was something of a burden, to be sure, and one that she could not ignore. "18 months later, at the time of her death, Saturn in Leo made an exact quincunx to the Sun in Pisces, a real-life adjustment to her purpose, reputation, and vision. Coming back to the pre-death triple conjunction at 22 Virgo, in synastry to her birth chart, we find a novile novile aspect to her natal Jupiter in Scorpio in her fourth house of ancestors and endings. The 40-degree novile aspect is a minor note that pertains to deeper psychological or spiritual dynamics, as well as fated outcomes. It becomes clear that the square of Mars to the Sun Uranus conjunction and the Sun-Saturn quincunx in her death chart were malefic aspects set in motion 18 months prior, forcing separations and applying constant pressure. The weight of the Saturn signature in her death chart was amplified by the Moon in a closing conjunction with Venus in Capricorn. She was likely working very hard at the time of her death, working alone, and feeling motivated to complete a project, though she may have been carrying and burying very heavy emotions. Venus and Moon in Capricorn. Ceres, the goddess of the harvest at 29 Capricorn, marked the ending of a cycle. Ceres is connected to our harvests and our grief rituals. She acknowledges the life-death-life cycle of nature, along with loss as a part of our human experience and development. Grieving a loss is a kind of harvesting of the relationship one had had with the singular life that has died. Grieving generally requires a sorting process of what will be carried forward and what will be forgotten. Paradoxically, it's in the pain of sorting through our grief that enables us to accommodate the loss and shape our lives into new meaning and wholeness. My guess is that Octavia was amid a great loss at the time of her death, and that her grief had been ongoing since the Sun-Moon-Mars conjunction. I say this because Ceres was tightly aspected in the triple conjunction at 21 Virgo. Sun, Moon, Mars would have each had their one-to-one meeting with Ceres before forming their conjunction. Harvesting and sorting were already in progress at the time of her death. Venus and Moon were also in a very close aspect to Ceres, moving towards her in a closing conjunction, knowing that an ending was on its way, each soon to cross over Ceres' 29 degrees of finality. Within the synastry natal death chart, 4 aspects speak of completion and transformation. 2 speak of severing ties. The first aspect being the closing Uranus-Sun conjunction mentioned earlier, a unique and weird mirroring of her birth Sun-Uranus opening configuration. The next 2 aspects involve Saturn and Jupiter. Just 4 months shy of her 59th birth cycle, Octavia died. That's not right. She was 57 when she died, so it must have been her 58th birth cycle. This was upon her 2nd Saturn return and her 6th Jupiter return. Though she was active in her writing projects, dying when she did synchronized with the closing of 2 major social cycles in her life. The Jupiter cycle of growth through upward expansion, and the Saturn cycle of growth through sustained effort and pressure. Both cycles were coming to a close, signaling the completion of a very significant stage of her life. The 4th aspect of the synastry chart was death chart Pluto at 26 Sagittarius, opposite the midpoint of Butler's Sun-Uranus natal conjunction. She was up against forces bigger than herself, Pluto. Were those universal forces friendly? With Pluto, there's always an enormous loss before the new-found resurrection arrives. For Butler, Pluto sat conjunct at the galactic center, which serves as the anchor for the entire galaxy. Our solar system rotates around this point. Planets conjunct the galactic center are believed to act as spiritual boosters, suggesting a higher purpose or an ability to channel universal intergalactic energy. It's absolutely profound and fitting that Octavia Butler, whose mind was so willing to see the universal truth and portray it through an unassuming young Black woman, a model citizen who would die to protect members of her community and to keep her dream for a better world alive. Pluto, the god of change, in her death chart, brought her into the galactic center, the spiritual booster site, guiding her purpose deeper towards a central anchor of safety for the benefit of all who would travel with her. The last 2 aspects that speak of severing ties involve death chart Mars, conjunct Butler's natal north node. Here, the spark of Mars lights up the length of her past, and the potential future ahead. Mars is desire, and Mars cuts one path into two. Whether or not she was ready for the rapture and the rupture, it arrived. I do think she was aware of her destiny. Butler's death chart Mercury at 24 Pisces opposed the 22 Virgo pre-death triple conjunction of Sun, Moon, and Mars. Her death chart Mercury was in direct eye line of the conjunction zone, the vibration point of action that evolved into the Sun-Mars square at the time of her death. The intelligence Mercury in her death chart was a knowing beyond words, Pisces, of her own evolution. Thank you. This concludes my Astro Death Chart reading for Octavia Butler. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.